other thing I wanted to ask you about, because I know it's a common difficulty is like having difficult conversations, right? Whether it's in the workplace or whether it's in your relationships with friends. What are your tips on being better, having those courageous conversations?
Researchers Maxfield and Granny did a fantastic research study on 11,000 people, and they found out that before you get into a difficult conversation, one brilliant tactic is to what they call intent before content. So that means to share your intention for the conversation before getting into the content of it, right? So imagine if we're about to have a difficult conversation. And I actually want to say to you, Aileen, I totally disagree with your stance on this. You know, the data you're looking at is you're presenting is incorrect, right? If I were to just go straight into that, you would probably feel like really defensive.
Right.
And then we
Right.
would have this conversation and, you know, that is over before it even started. So what they found, these researchers, is that there were two findings that they had. What they did was that they showed people, two actors, a male and a female actor, and they were both reading the same lines from the same script. And the lines were, I totally disagree with the data that you presented. It goes against blah, 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 right? Interestingly, they asked the observers to then rate the actor in terms of likability, competence, and how much market value or their salary do you think they should earn?
Mm-hmm.
Now, before the woman and the men started objecting and being difficult, everyone rated the woman as more likable than the man. But the moment the actors started saying the difficult things, right? Like, I totally disagree with the data. The people, the observers actually penalized the woman much more than the man. So she was I don't have the exact data, but she was penalized like tens of thousands of dollars in terms of her salary. They felt she should earn less. They felt that she was less effective and less competent at work when she was disagreeing, even though the man said the same things. And their research pointed out that there's this kind of like societal expectation that women should be pleasing. They should go along. And when they disagree, they're more likely to be labeled as hysterical, bitchy, you know, dragon lady, all these kind of stereotypes, because like people don't know what to do with a disagreeable woman. In stereotypes, you're supposed to be smiling and pleasing, right? So that was the first piece of their research. And the second piece of their research was like, however, when both the male and the female use these, what they call framing sentences or intent before content, they actually managed to reduce the negativity of how they were perceived at significantly. So let me demonstrate to you. The technique sounds a bit like this. Before you pound the table or disagree, you say something like, hey, Aileen, I really care deeply about honesty or integrity or whatever it is. You know, I care deeply about this project. I care deeply about the success of this initiative. And that's why I'm going to be quite direct about this, or that's why I'm going to speak quite passionately about this. And then I go into the conversation.
Yeah, it does change it. You're shaping the conversation in a way where the other person can empathize. Like, oh, I see. I understand.
Yeah. And what they found out is that when you have these so-called framing sentences, sharing your intention first makes the other party feel that you are thoughtful, that it is considered, and that you haven't suddenly lost the plot and you're not being overly emotional or like whatever it is. So,
Okay.
especially in Asia, where it's a very, very harmonious culture, I actually added on to this theory. I think it's very important to do in-grouping as well, a technique called in-grouping. So in-grouping is using a lot of we language, we, our, and, you know, collective language. So for instance, I had a real life example just day before yesterday. I was coaching somebody and she was working with a very difficult peer. So they were both team leads, and this peer of hers was being very defensive. And I advised her to say something like this. This person, by the way, a difficult person, was a newcomer to the organization she was in. So I advised her to say something like, hey, let's call him Frank, for example. Yeah. So I told her, instead of like what she did, which was just to send an email and to say, Frank, your team's not delivering, there's no accountability, blah, 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 which is what she did and ended up disastrously. But I was coaching her to instead have the conversation offline. Don't put it in an email. Like, call the person up, do it face to face. It's more intimate, it's more respectful. And to say something like, hey, Frank, before I get into this conversation, I wanted to say that when I saw that you had joined our organization, I was really excited because I felt like, there's so much to learn from you. You've had 10 years in this other organization, and I'm excited at the great things that we can achieve together. I really feel that our teams need to work closely together for the success of this initiative. And I'm looking forward to us having a long and fruitful or constructive relationship. And because of that, I want to be quite direct and transparent, because I think there are some areas of tension that we need to address. But I want you to know that, like, I feel like you're somebody who can really appreciate that transparency. And similarly, for you, if you ever see anything that you want to give me feedback on, I would really appreciate it if you return the favor as well. So all of this is before we've even gone into the difficult conversation.
Exactly. Wow.
You're kind of setting the tone, because I always remind people, when it's a difficult conversation, you got to remember there's something in your brain called the amygdala. The amygdala is an alarm bell, and it's always kind of like ringing. Its job is to scan the horizon for danger. If it finds any danger or any threat, then it starts ringing and it starts activating a very reactive fight or flight or, state where people get quite aggressive or defensive, or they shut down. So in a difficult conversation, the first, and I would say only, priority at the start is to deactivate the other party's alarm bell.
Yes. Make them feel safe. Make it feel like you're on the same team
That's
and
right.
you're working together. Yeah.
Exactly. Because imagine there's a
It's
car.
not an attack, because if you attack, they just defend,
For
right?
sure. The thing is, like, it's like the amygdala is so strong. It's such a survival mechanism. It's like a car alarm. Imagine that there's a car alarm outside your house going off, and it's rah, rah, rah. And then, like, you're trying to have like a logical conversation with somebody. You can't hear them because the alarm is so loud. So it's the same thing. When we're going to a difficult conversation, the first order of a priority is to deactivate the car alarm. And how do we deactivate it? We need to signal, I am not a threat to you. We're on the same team. We, a lot of this we energy, we are working on this together. And, even something as simple as saying, hey, Aileen, I'm so glad we've both made time for this. It's such a simple sentence. Like, you could say
Yeah.
it to your worst enemy, but like, it's literally like, I'm glad that both of us are coming together on this. But you'll be surprised at how powerful this like simple sentence is, because it's a we sentence.
Yeah.
And like, the moment we kind of frame the conversation in the we or our terms, right? It actually changes the mentality from it's me against you, and it's more like a us kind of thing. It's a collaborative problem-solving conversation. It's not like a power struggle between me or you, right or wrong, win or lose.